Chapter 18, Vinny dies, and I think we'll skip that one because of the language again, gets pretty coarse. It makes the point on my page 233 that 23% of the vets, 23% of the homeless are vets, and it might even be more than that, depending on which survey you look at, but still a very significant amount of homeless people are veterans. There's also a quote on my page 235 at the bottom. He says he's angry at God, and on 233, I guess before that, he makes the statement, all of our wars were carried on the backs of the poor and the sons of the poor. And I've kind of made that notice myself. I mean, that's not a uniform, but there certainly is a trend there for that. And even perhaps in today's military, I think you'd see a lot more Black and brown people in the military than are a percentage of the population. It's, to some extent, it's a way out of poverty for them. It's a job when there's no other job available. But anyway, that was to me, the interesting part to that chapter. Chapter 19, the opera. It raised the question, was Jesus homeless? You think, was he?
Well, he didn't, that we know, that I know, he didn't have a house that he lived in every day, right?
Right.
So he basically traveled around and preached and healed and but you know, I don't know that when we think of homeless, we think of poor people that, you know, have no other choice, and I don't think that was the case with him, so I'm not sure necessarily he's kind of
Like couch surfer.
is it?
Well, he depended on other people
Yeah,
for a place to stay and for food, and I gather that help was always there. His ministry was kind of focused on the poor.
It is interesting with Jesus that it is the women, rich women, who often supported him financially. I'm not sure which of the Gospels talks about that, but that's where he received a lot of his support.
Stan, you were mentioned that you really wanted this chapter, even with the brutality of what was happening to one.
Which chapter?
This one that starts out with them going to the opera and then winds up with them after that going to meet, trying to find a friend in Hansville who was being beaten by drug dealers that he owed money to. To me, the part of that chapter that stood out was the conversation at the what was it, Denny's, I guess, afterwards. After that, there really are some chapters there I'd like to read, but was there something else, Stan, that you wanted to focus on there?
I'm not sure. I don't think I had read that even until this week, so I'm not sure if I'm the one who said that.
Okay.
But as I look at it, the last page of this chapter, the homeless are human beings, he said. Okay, so they have people with problems, some greater than others, but there's no problem that can't be overcome with love, patience, kindness. Given help and a sense of direction, most will help themselves and even help others. Interesting.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to focus on, and even before that, he says, you know, the big thing that sets the homeless apart is that they usually only commit crimes out of desperation. Those with homes and jobs commit crimes out of boredom or hatred or greed. And I would say especially that last one, greed, is what stands out for me. Did you remember that the word homeless was on the Statue of Liberty?
Yeah.
I didn't at all, but let me read that word. It's a poem. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. So, I don't know.
The refuse, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
We've
Come a
gone-
long ways.
We've got a long way.
well,
Well, I mean, not just the political or lack of political correctness, but just the concept, you know, of send us cast offs and that.
well, but we've still got people at the southern border who kind of are here. In some cases, poverty, in some cases, it's just chaos where they live, lack of order and law enforcement, just ruled by gangs and gang violence to the point where they flee and become refugees or.
It's interesting that a comment about, I mean, using that language, given the era that it was written. I mean, it's an interesting picture of maybe the world at what, the turn of the century, 18th century, 19th century, I don't know when that was written, but obviously more than 100 years ago, maybe,
Oh, yeah.
that, you know, just the kind of chaotic, desperate times in which people lived. Currently, we think our civilization is sort of, I mean, it's kind of glosses over the other reality. That's, it's like, and we think ours is the norm, when maybe chaos and despair and desperation is more the norm for the majority of the world.
And it very, I mean, the Irish came here because of a potato famine.
Yeah.
And.
Yeah, I mean, most refugees have come. I don't know how many, my grandparents all came from Scandinavia. And they all came in the late 1800s to early 1900s. Usually late 1800s. And it was all because of economic kinds of situations, the inability to survive. And the masses of people who came during that time, but they were all European. Today they're not. And that is one of the issues that we're facing.
So I was thinking back to the Depression thing, my grandparents came from Missouri and during the Depression with no money, but there was family out there. So they came out here and they weren't on public assistance, and they were homeless when they got here, but I'm thinking about the people crossing the border. I mean, you come from Missouri to Washington, it's not going to cross that line, but you're going for a life, a possible life. And the people that are crossing our southern border are the same things. They just have to cross the border to get to Washington or Missouri or wherever they're going to. But also thinking that I don't see those people in the homeless. Those aren't homeless people. They have family or some support, or they find a community, and maybe they're welcome because they're all in that boat of, most of them, I think, are fairly poor when they get here. Some of them have money, but not all, so.
When I think of the Hispanic people that picked our apples and worked in our orchard and worked in the warehouses that packed food, and no, they weren't homeless. And The first ones got their foot in the door, and then the ones that followed were helped by family or even just friends of people who were already here. And so, no, I don't, the people that worked for us were pretty poor, but they were not homeless. And until the border closed, they would come during the summer and fall and pick strawberries and work their way north, picking apples and other tree fruit and grapes and things. And then when winter hit, they would go back to Mexico, back to their families in Mexico, and come back the following year, and just were itinerant that way. And they still found places to live here, even though they were pretty poor. Labor was our biggest expense, but they still didn't make very much by our standards. I would have liked to have paid them more, but the economics of it were just not there. Caroline and I didn't make that much when we were in the orchard business for those 10 years. And anyway.
Yeah, my grandmother, my father's mother, was born in 1906 in California in an itinerant farm labor camp in a tent. She was born in a tent. And her father, so my great grandmother died, I believe, in childbirth right there. And then, so my great grandfather fell into a deep depression and never worked again a day of his life, according to my dad. And so my little grandmother was eventually adopted by a family nearby. But the impact on that generation and probably further generations of my great grandmother dying and then my great grandfather in this deep depression that he never came out of. It impacted the whole family on and on. But if somebody had not taken my grandmother in, who knows? Who knows? I mean, she was a lovely, wonderful woman that I knew as a child and a wonderful person, loving and warm and singing hymns all day long in her home, like just a lovely person. But I think that mental health breakdown there was probably a key factor. Like, okay, they were poor, they lived in a tent, but add on to that some kind of debilitating illness of mental or physical. It was just,
Yes, so again, my mind's spinning about the people crossing the border that are poor. They don't end up, they aren't what we consider homeless. And then I listen to what you're saying, the homeless people aren't poor people. They're people with issues, mental issues, or, psychological issues or medical issues, or things that they're not able to pull themselves and or lack of support, but it's not necessarily that they're poor. Poor people don't make homeless people. Homeless people come, maybe a contributing factor, but I don't know. I don't think it's the key factor, but maybe, I don't know.
Well, we'll get to that again in chapter 23 and talk about, he lists out the problems that each of the players on the softball team had. And that's worth looking at and spending some time at. So anyway, so much for chapter 19.
Somewhere in the book, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but somewhere in the book, and I liked it, it said that every homeless person has a story and we just have to listen to it. And then I think there was a place of, maybe it was the newspaper article I brought that the pastor spent 10 minutes with a homeless person and really made an impact on him. So I don't know. Maybe.
On the pastor.
Yes, yes. He has been working, I think, with the homeless in some kind of a group. Yeah. Anyway.
So in chapter 20, the question is raised, I thought, depression, which Richard suffered from. Is it curable or treatable?
Of course it is. Yeah.
Well, which though?
And I have suffered depression. And so your question is what? I'm sorry.
Well,
Is it treatable or is it curable?
yeah. Do do people really get cured from it? I'm not sure that Richard ever did.
I think it depends on the severity, the source, the resources available to. It just all depends.
Yeah, some depression could be situational. And some is more clinical,
Yeah.
right, requiring medication on an ongoing basis.
Well, beyond that, in Lucky Rocks, I don't know, I asked the question, how can C be so positive and so upbeat under his circumstances? And see, the character is really,
Yeah. You're the next.
yeah, just interesting to the max, I guess. And I don't know, in the very back, Richard says everything in the book is 98% true. Makes me wonder if maybe she might be a composite. But still, it's and it's almost like she has, could be living a life not in the camper on the back of a truck, but he has chosen the life that he leads, maybe.
Yeah, it reminds me, Steve reminds me in some level of a guy that I worked with, well, several people, but one, I think of one guy in particular. When I was in college, I sold shoes, and I worked at this one shoe store, and there was a guy that his name was Kurt, actually, that worked there. And these guys start making a lot of money, in retail sales like that. I'm just doing it kind of part-time. And this guy, he sort of seemed to, had a pretty simple, kind of a simple lifestyle, and he did, but that it sort of fit. It wasn't like a career thing for him, but it fit, what he wanted. He made enough money to be able to kind of live simply and do some of the things that he wanted to do. And there are, I don't know about C's case in particular, but I think there are some people that feel constrained otherwise, and they might, either they seek that or they've grown maybe accustomed to that, family with kids, a dog, and that kind of stuff, and all those things are not something that they want to be tied down to. I don't know.
I have a friend like that in Port Angeles, yes. Who chooses to live very simply.
Well,
Very.
I think I have a niece that way, or the niece's husband sells shoes. And they live very simply and raised, well, 6 children, I guess, 3 by her first marriage and 3 by their marriage, second marriage for her. And they do okay. She has what is it, a blog? Is it a blog, I guess, that she does on living simple, how to get rid of all the stuff and live a simpler life. And she evidently makes some money from doing this and putting a new thing into her blog weekly or something like that, to how to live a simple life. Chapter 21 is the Hilton, or the Hilton in the Woods. And I'm not sure there's too much here to talk about. They keep coming, what was it, Fred Meyers, I guess, that have the big loudspeaker that kept saying, Bob, come to Home and Garden, or whatever else. And here close by are these dozen people or whatever, young people mostly, and maybe entirely, that are camped out in the woods. And
What stood out to me in that, Jason, one of the kids said Kent State. Where is that?
you know, they had no idea what had taken place at Kent State. And I think we were in Israel and we were at the Holocaust Museum. And there were a group of kids who came in from a school. And the teachers talked to us and said, we have to constantly be telling our children about the Holocaust, or they will not understand it. They will not have any kind of grasp of it. And I think that's what we are failing to do today, at least in huge parts of our nation. We're afraid of history. And that is really, really dangerous.
We have some people, I think, that are in denial of history.
Mhm.
That, just anything that doesn't fit their notions, they will. What? Not accept that it actually happened, not accept that the riot at the Capitol on
Yeah,
January
There's
6th
that, yeah.
happened.
Mhm.
And they're living in their own little fantasy world sometimes. Not sure that's the same as what was trying to happen here, but you had a lot of these young people were school dropouts, and even if things like this were taught in school, the dropouts don't get it. If they're sitting there exercising their right to fail, then they don't learn either what they need to. And when I student taught, it was in a very rough or blue collar neighborhood, I guess, and that's what I was up against as a student teacher to some extent. Was a number of kids that were just putting in their time, just failing, and once they got out of there, they could then go to work at the Ford assembly plant or the GM assembly plant and make a living without much education. But that situation no longer exists. Manufacturing just isn't the same today as it was now. I mean, a lot of it's been offshore, but there's a lot that's still going on, but it's a higher tech workforce today than it was 50 years ago.
Is this chapter with the women that come with the food?
Yep, that's the chapter.
Yeah. That was really moving.
Yeah, I think it was.
Come with the food and take away the laundry
Mhm.
to be done, so help them out. And the one woman talked about her husband had psychiatric problems and was homeless for a while and was saved by someone who took care of him. So she was taking care of, she and a couple of friends were taking care of these homeless young people camped out in the woods, and they kind of lived in fear of the cops coming along and rousting them out, and then thereby losing again all that they had, all the books, interestingly, and the radio. But the one guy was listening to Beethoven somehow, and but on a radio that came from a dumpster or something, I believe, and what he didn't hardly have anything, but he was still afraid that the cops would come and force them to leave, and that he would lose everything that he had again, including clothing that he had.
Well, they had the tarps around where they were.
Yeah.
And, I know that one of the problems that the homes that are living around here have is somebody will come in and tear up their tent, they'll either destroy their tent or take their tent away. And all of a sudden they're out in the rain instead of having a shelter.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and it's either probably cops or landowners that complain to the police that people are.
Well, and maybe some people are doing that, just out of means.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, people do crazy things just because they get a little thrill out of it.
Well, and I think it pumps their ego to some extent, maybe doing stuff like that.
Well, I think it also depends. I mean, John, part of his duty is to go around and see, if there's any evidence of encampment around the church and, clean up if there are messes and things like that. And, it varies. I mean, there are times when there'll be stuff that's out there for a few days. And after a few days, we'll clean it up and throw it away or set it. I don't know, do you ever set things right next to the dumpster? I mean, sometimes people will go through and, I might see somebody out my window go through and pick stuff out of there, but we don't necessarily know. And then there are other people, I think that there was a homeless man that was here. Well, he was here on Monday. I don't know if if it was the same person that was here on Sunday. Some people noticed there was a homeless person on the porch out there on Sunday. And we were wondering, like, what do we do? Do we wake him up or we don't know, was it he or she for that matter? And said, well, whoever it is, when they get up, invite them for a cup of coffee and, that sort of thing and some, cookies or whatever, but let's not disturb that person. It's weird because you don't know, right? You don't know what the right call is in the moment. And as the sort of landowner, if you will, we have a lot of different things that we can at our disposal, and it's hard to know, what the right situation is. But some people come and use the place and they leave a mess. I mean, human waste as well as food waste and whatever. I mean, that's just disgusting. But, and other people come and, they're pretty, they kind of maybe clean up after themselves. They come and go and we might not even notice. It's hard.
That's the reason though, that kids want to always have somebody at their camp. Is that they don't want somebody else to come in and steal their stuff.
Yeah, it might be.
Whether it's food that's being stolen or
Yeah.
the camp itself or whatever.
I heard kind of, I don't know if I think it's kind of hearsay and I don't know all the details and I kind of wish Pam was here today to kind of say how she feels with Taffy. But, there's this organization, PA Can, and this guy is doing, I thought, great things, trying to clear out the homeless. And then it kind of seems in conflict a little bit with what Taffy is trying to do. But I don't know the details of it exactly. Does anybody else know that? I don't. Taffy is maybe providing things for the homeless and then PA Can is taking them out or.
Is that for PA?
Yeah, I do mean for PA. Thank you
Oh,
very
for
much.
PA.
Yeah,
Oh,
for
oh,
PA. Sorry.
4PA is speaking to do, if I understand.
Yeah.
They're cleaning up areas
Right.
that
Yeah.
are messes.
Yeah.
But they've also expanded now and hopefully will be building homes for homeless. Now, it hasn't started yet.
They're getting financially to
Yeah.
where they can.
Yeah. My understanding is that Taffy, the kids that are there are not homeless. They're not living on the streets.
So they might be couch surfing.
They might
something
be
like that.
couch
Yeah,
surfing and stuff,
yeah. So they're sort of homeless, but they're not necessarily on the
but they're not
streets.
on the streets. They're not that type of thing.
I think, and they don't know for sure, but I think a lot of them come from troubled homes where they're not,
Yeah.
usually they can go to their parents.
Well, I'd like to move on and get through chapter 23. Chapter 22, Andy gets lucky and then he dies. And I'm not sure beyond that, if there's too much that we can say, but chapter 23
Yeah.
with its lineup was pretty interesting.
Oh,
First base, I don't know if you don't have any votes. Maybe I need to fill in, I'm not sure. Anyway, Donna is on first base. And do you recall what her problem was?
We can't catch.
She couldn't catch.
Yeah, that's right.
Very,
Can't catch and weighs how much?
340.
340 pounds. Yes. And she can't catch, but, you know,
But she wants to play first base.
well, she wants to play, yeah, and at 340 pounds, no one argues with her. So, anyway, second base is Justin. And he's young and strong, but disoriented. He doesn't throw the ball where he needs to. He's likely to throw it anywhere. So
Yeah.
anyway, he's and there's probably not enough there to tell us really what Justin's problem is, but evidently he's homeless and
Well, he's been sniffing paint thinner for years.
okay.
Looks like he's been sniffing paint.
Yeah.
for years.
Okay, we've talked about C quite a little. And this comes out that he has poor eyesight, which is a real disability for playing ball, maybe not so much for other things, so it kind of depends. Anyway, Richard is on third. We know all about him. He takes Zoloft. Preston takes Zoloft. And so we don't need to talk about Richard probably. Left field is Mary. You remember which character she was?
Mary's good at striking out.
Yeah,
Yes.
well,
Yeah,
and
38 times.
I've got her at 97 pounds, so she's a kind of a 97-pound weakling, but she is determined, even though she is small, and even though she strikes out.
And she throws as hard as she can. We probably-
David. 6'4". £220. And he's evidently not homeless, he's a kitchen volunteer. And, you know, doesn't really, I suppose a homeless person might also be a kitchen volunteer, but at least in the Salvation Armies, when I was a volunteer, none of the volunteers were homeless. And not all of the people who came for lunch were necessarily homeless, but they were had problems of whatever kind, even if they had homes and were still maybe living with their parents. Some of them looked perfectly normal until they opened their mouths and would try and speak or did speak or whatever, and then you knew that there was a problem there. So the right field is Bob. Bob's a gifted musician, works as a laborer, drinks too much, winds up in jail occasionally. And it's not necessarily homeless, but maybe close. If not. Tony, the pitcher, is alcoholic, has the shakes. Especially shakes if he doesn't drink, But there's a point, if he drinks just a little, he can stop, get the shaking under control. But then, of course, if he drinks too much, he's totally drunk and unable to do anything. So, Patrick is Bill. And Bill is mentally ill, bipolar, psychotic, talks to himself. Says the pitcher who with the shakes and the catcher who's bipolar and talks to himself were a good pair, and they intimidated the batters. And I guess we don't really know for certain that all these people are alcoholic, or pardon me, are homeless, but they could be. This one reminds me of my aunt, mother's sister, who suffered from some pretty serious bipolar disorder, but the state of Iowa looked after her pretty well. I mean, she had an apartment for a few years, and she wasn't really happy there, I don't think, but she had still a pretty nice apartment in a pretty nice building with pretty nice grounds around the building, and so she was far from homeless. Okay, then first base was Joseph. And he describes him as tall and lean, probably a pretty good player, but he'd been in jail for assault. Evidently had come out of jail homeless. Second base, Stephen. Stephen hadn't just been in the jail, he'd been in prison and was a convicted felon in robbery and was unable to get a job because of that. And we hope that our post-hoc person that we're working with is able to stay with a roof over their head and get a job, but it won't be easily or certain, but at least she's making a go of it for now. Jake, shortstop. Had no shoes, he was barefoot, and his feet were a real problem. He was a Vietnam vet. We already mentioned that maybe a fourth to a third of homeless people are veterans. Partly that's because they're so poor when they go in the service, they don't have anything. They come out of the service, they still don't have anything. Brady. Brady's 6'2", 195 pounds, which sounds good, but he also had a foot problem, walks with a limp evidently, and is a Vietnam vet. Both of these were not just vets, but injured vets with physical problems that they still have.
Don, I'm wondering time-wise, if we want to continue putting everything down, Or what is the significance of the ball game itself? But why is it even in here?
I think he wants us to get the full sweep of reasons why people wind up homeless. Someone said that everyone has a different story, which they do, and he wanted to give us, I think, a snapshot or a thumbnail sketch of all these homeless people and why they were homeless, why they wound up that way.
See, Nancy sees something different. I have to attribute this to Nancy. What she saw in this game that they're playing is everyone was accepted. And they played and they had fun. We don't do it that way.
That's what I was telling
You know, she's saw not simply that they all had problems, but that they really accepted each other for who they were.
It's a good point.
And I didn't see that.
Most of
I just
them,
read it.
Yeah.
most of them had problems playing.
Yeah, well,
And baseball is a game where you got to play as a team. It was hard for the people that were decent athletes to play with these people that were barely capable of playing baseball.
yeah, but they did.
Yeah.
I get that, your point is they did play.
They did. They had fun.
Well, and a few of them were good athletes and
Yeah,
were able to hit, run, catch.
And I think that choice of game was baseball, you know, kind of the all-American sport. It has sort of maybe a normalizing back
yeah.
for everybody.
Well, on my 289, there's a great big thing on baseball is caring. And it goes on and on. And like they say, the game isn't over till the fat lady sings. There was hope.
Well,
I love the part on baseball, of course.
but this really brings out Richard as the sports writer.
Yeah, yeah,
He had experience as a
yeah.
sports writer and
Yeah, I bet he had fun writing that chapter.
I think probably it's in there because he was the sport.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, if it was one of those things that happened, he probably needed to be written about. As far as the impact on me, it was pretty low impact. Not nearly as much as some of the other chapters.
to start with, he talks about how crummy the winters are in our area and how wonderful spring is. Yesterday was a pretty great day after all that. What clouds and drizzle and drips and stuff. But anyway, our time is up. We need
So
to.
this one thing, it was great for me is everybody's included. When I grew up, our front yard was a baseball field and a football field. And every kid in the neighborhood played. And it didn't matter if you were 6 years old or, you know, probably stopped playing around 14, but everybody played, we divide up and pick. And everybody got picked. And then you put the people that couldn't roll closer to the end of the field. And so it created this, you know, you had teammates and, you know, and you encouraged them and it was just really cool for me to, it's like, it was a family, it was a neighborhood family playing baseball, and baseball was a place where everybody can play. You know, we used to give some kids 5 strikes. I mean, it just made the rules so everybody can play and have some success, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I don't know about strike.
There aren't enough strikes.
Well, and that brings back memories to me too of trying to play Little League and I wasn't any good at it. You know, or put another way, I guess I was great at it, except for running, hitting and catching. But that I couldn't do. But anyway, why doesn't someone else close us in prayer here today? I opened. Who can we call on if no one's volunteering? John, could you close us in prayer? I'll try.
Heavenly Father, we give thanks for this time that we can share together, studying this book, trying to understand what our relationship is to these homeless people that we're reading about, how we should respond, within our own community, our own church. Lead us to your grace and love, your mercy. Give us insight as to how we can love the people that we don't automatically love, that we find in some ways a bit repulsive. Open our minds and our hearts. We ask this in your son's name. Amen.
It's not English.